Good evening, Happy New Year. My name is Mark Masai, and this is our first edition of Press Pass. Glad you could join us. This is what's coming up.
Anything that we have not negotiated, and I'm saying in broad daylight, we shall reject.
We didn't want a rollout in 2018 when teachers were not prepared.
What led to the sharp about turn on the new curriculum rollout? Did media do its homework on this story?
We would like to urge every Kenyan to know that journalists are messengers. Anyone attacking a journalist is on the wrong side of the law.
Let it be known that threats and attacks on journalists will not stop the ladies and gentlemen of the Fourth Estate. Let me introduce my panel. Glad to have Dr. Sara Ruto again on this panel. Thank you for making the time. I know you have a tight schedule. And she is the chair of the KICD Council, that is the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development, and as well an educationist specialist, has been on this particular panel and on other panels in this capacity as an education specialist. Next to her is Wandia Njoya, Dr. Wandia Njoya. I insist on saying that. And she is a lecturer at Daystar, has been a teacher for quite some years, and is a blogger. I'm sure you've seen some of her articles on the various issues, and she has a keen interest on education matters, has been tagging me throughout Christmas holidays. Thank you for that, and that's why we have you here tonight. And next to her is Bona David Aduda. He is the head of business development here at Nation Media Group, but more importantly, his first degree is actually on education, and he is part of the 36-member task force on the reforms within the education sector. We're glad to have you, and he's an education specialist as well, has a keen interest on that. Let me just get this clear and out of the way, just for those who want to threaten the media practitioners. The Media Council of Kenya has condemned the threats towards Daily Nation journalist Justice Wanga from the head of the Deputy President's spokesperson office, communications office, David Mugonyi, and this was based on a story done on the Sunday Nation, which indicated that there are some divisions between the president and his deputy over the cabinet positions and appointments. The Deputy President has denied any form of division following this particular story. In case you missed that recording of the threats towards the Daily Nation journalist, here's an excerpt of that put together by a digital team.
Unataka kufutwa kazi?
Eh?
Unataka kufutwa kazi?
Mimi? Na nani?
I want to be outright.
Sorry?
I want to be outright with you. Ukitaka kufutwa kazi, continue with that path. Utafutwa. Utafutwa. Sikudanganya. Utafutwa.
Lakini unajua Mungu ndiye anajua hizo mambo.
Haijalishi, nakwambia for free.
Maisha na kazi.
There are people who have crossed that path before.
And there are
Ukitaka kufutwa kazi, utafutwa.
But there are
Sikudanganya. You are not going to abuse other people than Danganya. That proves that you are not the first journalist, my friend.
Me, my friend.
You are not the first
You
journalist.
have no right whatsoever to call to threaten me.
Well, let me give it to a senior, and Dr. Ruto, you don't have to worry, you don't have to comment on this particular one because this is not your line of interest. But I believe this is actually one of our colleagues, Bwana Mgonyi. He was a colleague of ours within the newsroom, and it's quite unfortunate that this comes from him after the story that was on Sunday Nation. Your position on this, really quick, and perhaps even Wendy, if she wants to comment on this.
Thank you. It's very unfortunate. David Mugonyi was one of the guys we mentored here at Nation. He joined Nation many years after we had been here. I mentored him, helped him. I'm really disappointed to hear him doing that. I've never expected that. I thought he was a gentleman, and I think that's quite disastrous.
Right.
Somebody who is now sitting in number two's office throwing tantrums like that, I think is a shame. And I hope the DP has taken note of that.
All right. Wandia, any comment on this?
It's very un-African to threaten truth tellers, the journalists, teachers, since we're talking about teachers,
right.
preachers, people whose job it is to tell stories for society. It's just not right to threaten them. And I hope that this is going to be the last time we hear of something like
It's quite
this.
good to hear you tell us or call us the truth tellers, because you're quite the critic on our practice, and we appreciate that. You keep us on our toes. And yes, as a professional journalist myself, I would also condemn this, and this will not cower us from our work, and this should be the tone going into 2018. We will continue with our job. But let's hear from the Media Council of Kenya CEO David Omoyo on this particular incident, as well as that an attack on 4 journalists in Lodwar, Turkana County on the 1st of January at the Jade Sea camp. And the 4, Peter Warutumo of NTV, Sami Luta of Daily Nation, Philip Ekadeli of Radio Maisha, and Hesbon Etiang of The Star were attacked. And apparently this was because they were doing negative stories on the Turkana County.
The Media Council of Kenya has received reports of threats against a journalist by a senior government official. This is the second case we have received in 2018. On the 1st of January, journalists covering a community function in Lodwar were attacked by community members and the equipment confiscated. We would like to urge every Kenyan to know that journalists are messengers. Anyone attacking a journalist is on the wrong side of the law, is on the wrong side of humanity, and is in the wrong side of history. Nobody attacks messengers. The Constitution has put in place very clear mechanisms for anybody to seek redress when they think that they have received unfair media coverage.
And now, since that is very clear, let's get to the crux of the matter and the focus of the discussion tonight, and that is on the education reforms. And last week on Wednesday and Thursday, the top story on most papers and broadcasting stations was that the Ministry of Education and Teachers Union leaders had announced that they had agreed on the rollout of Phase 2 of piloting for the new school curriculum nationally. Education Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i said the rollout is on course, as well as a plan to phase out 844 system by 2027. Here's an excerpt from the story that was done by Sharon Baranga.
For decades, people have been finding hundreds of flaws in the education system. No conceptual understanding, no creativity. Children are stressed.
We didn't want a rollout in 2018 when teachers were not prepared. Now that there is a commitment to undertake the training of teachers in 2018, after the during the national piloting, then it's okay.
We are going to introduce a new curriculum using a phased-in approach, as opposed to what many people may be aware of, or when many people may be thinking of a switch-on, switch-off affair, where we wake up one morning and say, from now we have stopped implementing the old curriculum, we are now working on a new curriculum.
The competency-based curriculum is seeking to ensure that we skill children, that they are not just children who know something academically, but can do something. And one of the shifts that will allow us to do that is to make a child to learn. And you learn when you're thinking. One of the things we have trained all the 170,000 teachers is that they must have inquiry-based questions. It is a very big shift from the previous one that was all about content. What is your name? What are you doing? Content, only content. Here we are asking children, by asking questions, you're teaching a child to think and to also ask. And that is the basis of creativity.
And we'll hear more on that particular implementation of this new curriculum. And just weeks before this particular announcement that there was an agreement, the stakeholders, including the leaders of the teachers' unions, were breathing fire over the implementation of some of these programs. This was just some weeks from this particular announcement, and many are asking, what was the turnaround about? What caused this? Listen in.
A team that was working on this, that brought everybody in the education sector on board, everybody, and I mean everybody, including the unions. They sat throughout with us for the last 1 year. We have been working with them. So when I hear people saying, oh, we have not been consulted, I don't know what else they mean.
Anything that we have not negotiated, and I'm saying in broad daylight, we shall reject.
The new curriculum reform has a lot of challenges because nationally, our teachers, our heads of institutions, apart from 170 schools which were piloted, have the knowledge of the new curriculum reforms, and we as leaders. But the majority, all of us, are at sea.
Let me start with Wandia, who brought it to my attention that perhaps we were misled or didn't quite follow the details on this particular curriculum implementation, because on one day we're announcing that there might be a postponement on this particular implementation, and the next day we're saying that there is an agreement. Were you convinced as you saw these stories being beamed and even headlined?
Actually, in fact, the press conference at which the CS announced that we are doing a pilot this year, he literally told the media that they didn't understand what they had been reporting all along, and the media didn't pick it up. Instead, they reported that Matiang'i had cleared the confusion, and then they didn't even say what confusion there was and how what he said had cleared the confusion. So I found that interesting that the media didn't pick up that they were actually being told, you guys don't know anything, right, and that all the misunderstanding is the media's fault. I don't know how they didn't pick that up. I think maybe the pressure to give the public something, yes, but that was basically the message of that day.
Right. Do you feel that indeed we didn't understand this issue well enough as we were reporting about it, hence this turnaround that seemed like a shock, but perhaps we were reading the wrong script?
Definitely no. We've been reporting about this thing since 2015. And in 2016, 2017, when there was a national conference in Nairobi at KICC, the media rightly reported about this. Now, what was not clear, and I think these were the crux of the matter, was the conception of the rollout. Because what the minister explained last week was that rollout comprises things like piloting, teacher training, textbook development, and then actual implementation. But the media's interpretation, which I believe where the problem was, the media may have thought that the rollout meant that in 2018, the actual teaching of the new curriculum was starting in schools, which was not the case.
Right.
But I think the point of reporting about this and clarifying the issues, this has been an ongoing process. And I know most of us started this way back in 2012 when the task force by Professor Odhiambo started the whole question of reform. So it has been a long thing. But at this point, there was some confusion. And I also remember the minister clarifying one point, that perhaps the way the minister was communicating the message was also not clear to the public. Or the minister thought they're communicating, but they were talking among themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was perhaps this, and you were intimately and are still intimately involved in this rollout of the pilot phase, I should say. Do you feel then, is it more of the media's fault in giving a misconception, or was it a communication problem from your end?
First and foremost, I think because education is something that everyone in themselves and in their right can be an educator, many people assume that they know all the detailed going-ons.
Okay.
And they don't. It is like, I don't know, an engineer who's making a car, you know. They know a lot more about whatever valves and things inside there, but the rest of us just have top level. So there's been a lot going on, very detailed curriculum development matters that has been in the kitchen and may not have been privy to the public. And so when we have seen certain statements that have made, and I suppose the media also was reporting what people were saying, Those statements may have come from perhaps a lack of information or ill information, I don't know, but it was not reflective of the detailed planning that had been going on. And so one also needs to balance what kind of information you share out. Okay. Because when something is still under trial and development, you need to be at a level where you're confident that this is what needs to be communicated in the right way. So I think there's been a lot of tension. Any change to something else brings a lot of tension. Perhaps there was a lot of fear that what we saw happening with the 844 will be what will happen, but that's not the case. Okay. We have gone through an incremental approach, and that needs to be understood. This is very incremental, biting what we can chew.
Right. Something else that came out on that particular day, on Wednesday, when the announcement was made, and was that, you know, now the teachers' unions feel a bit more convinced that this rollout is okay, as explained by the stakeholders, KICD and the ministry, and they felt that the teachers will be ready. But not too long ago, they were saying the teachers are not well prepared enough. Was this interrogated well in terms of the preparation for the teachers to actually implement this particular curriculum?
I was not convinced by the unions, and I said that actually if they really had this turnaround, they should have explained to us what made them shift their position in just 1 hour. You know, 1 week, Sosion is saying, you know, the teachers have not been involved, and then the next week he says he's okay. But for me, that's not the main issue. KICD has not been forthcoming with the information. I remember I started talking about the curriculum in May last year, and I asked for the framework. The person who handles their Twitter just said it's on the website, and I couldn't find the link on the website. So somebody else told me on Facebook, Google it, Google KICD and curriculum framework, and that's how you'll get the framework. So that's how I found it and downloaded it. It was not immediately accessible. Okay. And then as we went along, we were told that it was the pilot in May, and then I don't know what happened. I think it was elections or something. Then we were told, oh no, the pilot is in September. I can't remember the details, but it has not been clear right from the start what is going on. And I've even asked KICD officials, can you send me the needs assessment report, because I can't see it on your website. They keep quiet. And somebody told me informally that the reports will not be released because somebody has to approve who has not approved. But how is it that you're unrolling a curriculum without approved, on the basis of documents that are not approved? And the media, sorry to say, I think they got mesmerized by language. What I noticed was that, you know, officials will pull out these big language, stakeholders, needs assessment, pilot, whatever. And the media didn't ask, when they didn't understand, what does pilot mean exactly? What do we do when a pilot is done? What happens after the pilot? I think education tends to be very intimidating in Kenya. We tend to get mesmerized by big English words, and we don't want to look foolish, so we don't ask the questions. But I kept asking, what does pilot mean? What exactly is happening in the classroom? What are teachers going to do after that? What happens with the information that the teachers collect? Those are the questions the media should have been asking, right, and they didn't.
Aduda, as an education specialist and someone who's keen on that, you say we've been reporting on this since 2015. In fact, you're a representative of the media within the task force.
Exactly.
Have you failed in your job?
Yes.
You have failed.
Now, let me explain this clearly. First, what Wandia has said is true, that education is a difficult subject. I've been an education editor for many years. I know that writing education is difficult. But some of us, Dr. Wandia, understand it very well for the sake of information. So that one can rest assured that somebody like me has expertise in it and understands it. But more substantively, the problem with education is that it is a process, it's not an event. Covering an event is easy. When a fire breaks out, it's easy to cover. But education is a process, involves many stages, and some of these may be difficult. And one of the things I agree with you is some of the terminologies. Now, one of the things we've been discussing, even the task force, is simplicity. Because, for example, a number of times we hear conversation about formative evaluation, summative evaluation, which we may not understand. So we've been insisting on simplicity because that's what resonates with our consumers.
But isn't that the job of the media to break it down? That's what we say.
Yes, and one of the things, and I want to refer, for example, how NTV covered this thing last week. There was a breakdown on every stage in a simple manner. Now, I want to refer Dr. Wandia and other viewers. When, for example, we had the first national conference, it was in March last year at KICC. Now, we did a number of stories breaking down not only what the stages are, but what involves at every stage. We gave a presentation of, for example, the structure of the curriculum and what every stage has. Even when you go through in the curriculum, there are what we call pathways. We gave very diagrammatic representation of these pathways so that people could follow. Part of the problem is people also forget. Because sometimes we do these things and then you don't see it in the next 2 months, you think that much has not been done. But much has been done. Anybody doing a content analysis would look at what you've done and you'll see that there's been some remarkable milestone in coverage of this. But I must emphasize this, that in the last 2 months, there was politics and education all enmeshed together. And what do I mean? We had a situation in which this curriculum was being politicized, so there was a much more noise on the political element of the education than the content of the education. And all of us are aware that education is about politics. So that really was in play. And that's why various stakeholders, for example, the unions, started riding on the politics of it at the expense of the content.
Right. And as you respond to this, Dr. Ruto, you've not been forthcoming with the details and the steps, the process so far, and from a perspective of someone who's interested, a stakeholder. She's a teacher and she's as well would have children in schools. Why has this been the case in terms of you being open with the information?
When I was listening to Dr. Wandia, I actually thought we've not done too bad because everything she said was actually factual. The pilot began in May. It did. It began in May and it continued on to the next phase. So probably what we can do is to improve on it. Mm-hmm. Yes, she had to go through a lot of Googling to get the report, but she did get the report. We can improve on that. Okay. I've even come with the report, and any other time whenever we meet various people, what we try to do as police is to ensure that you share this information. So I think it would be a little bit harsh to say we haven't done anything. But we agree, and that is very central even in the new curriculum, which is the centerpiece of it is learning, that we can learn and we can improve. Right. And that is what we've been doing. I think let me just stress the fact that there have been very many activities going on last year that a number of people may have missed it. I suspect perhaps that even the unions missed the fact that actually we had a massive training going on, induction of 168,000 teachers to be precise, almost 170,000 teachers. And all this happened in the latter weeks of November and December. And it was like a well-oiled machine in a cascade. And it's probable that when they were saying that teachers have not been prepared, they actually did not know. But this has been the multiplicity of activities, very detailed, very thought out, very meticulous, that have been happening. So what we shall do as we go on is to communicate this more. But I think what we'd like everybody to know is that this has been a very meticulous process. From the scope and designs, that today we are no longer talking about the syllabus, we are talking about designs, and there's a reason for that. So there's a big conceptual shift that happened first with the Institute, then with the cadre of master teachers that were trained, about 200, 300, who were practicing teachers, and these are the people who are then cascading and moving it on. So yes, we began with 470 schools, because you must begin, and all of them are nationally represented in all counties. This will hopefully be the centers that other teachers can go to, and then you spread. So there's a cascade going on, very incremental, and I think it would be good to give us at least a plus on that, because this is not like 844, which was like switch on, switch off. This is very incremental, very planned, and there is an answer for everything. So we can communicate it more, but I think it would be disastrous to say that nothing is happening.
Right.
Okay, let me just say, I didn't say nothing has been happening. I just said that the information that some of us would like to have is not available. The pilot report, we've not seen it. We have not seen the needs assessment report, because these, especially the needs assessment, is very important, because we need to know this curriculum that we are being given, what problems is it addressing? Because you can't just tell a teacher, now teach like this, without the teacher knowing, oh, I am teaching like this because this is what I am trying to achieve. So we need to see the needs assessment report. And if you see, even in the few times I've been in the media, I've always been asking that question, and we've not got the report. What is there on the internet, again, is SlideShare, which you have to Google and find it through the, the corners of the internet. And then it's just slides. And even when you look at the information there, it just doesn't feel legitimate. The statistics are odd, so, and even when you hear the KICD officials saying, we are doing this for the job market because employers are complaining, actually that's not what the SlideShare says. It says that parents were concerned about character development, about are there other things that their children can do besides, getting grades and everything. And they're also concerned about national cohesion. Can the school system teach them to be respectful to one another? But when you look at the curriculum framework, the first thing it tells you is Vision 2030, jobs, careers. I mean, there's a disconnect. And let me just say, for teachers, maybe for the public, they want to hear the flowers. Right. They want to hear, oh, now your kids are going to get jobs. Oh, now they're going to learn history or whatever. But for us teachers, teaching is a production, like what you do here. We have to think, what are the materials I'm going to use? What are the activities I'm going to carry out in the classroom? So we can't just rely on teachers were involved. That's not good enough for us. We want to know, okay, what did the teachers do in the class? Okay. How did it turn out? How did the kids react? Did the class work? What about assessment? How do they assess? What are the results? You see, for teachers, we want these details, and they are not forthcoming. All we get is pictures of teachers dancing on the KICD Twitter handle. That's not enough for us. Okay. It's good PR, which is what maybe that's what the media like, but it's not good for teachers.
All right.
I think we're mixing up two issues here. There is an issue of the development of the curriculum, and then there is the issue of the implementation of the curriculum, and then finally there is the achievement. And in a quick, broad way, those are the three steps. You talk about what you want, then implementing it, and finally what you learn. I have not come with the needs assessment, but it is the needs assessment that ended up and gave us the result of this basic education curriculum framework. It is based on the initial research that was done, and that is the mandate of the Institute, that you do research, and based on what you hear, this is when you develop the framework. And based on this framework, this is where the curriculum designs were developed. And this framework has to connect with the national vision of the country. It has then to connect with the curricular expectations. So what we have at the moment has followed all the key steps. And that is the mandate of a curriculum developer. And nobody else can take it. And it is a very scientific process. Right. And you cannot expect somebody who has not been trained to come and do it. So I'd like to differ with you that you cannot just expect every other person to come and do curriculum development. I am an educationist, and I have been practicing and researching for many years. But I tell you that I cannot actually do a scope and design. And not one person can do it. It's panels who do it. Right. So, I think I did not interrupt you, so perhaps you need to also give me the space to continue. So I think it is a little bit careless to state that it is not a legitimate process simply because you have not gotten one report or another.
All right.
I have not said anywhere that it is not a legitimate process.
you
I'm
said the
just
word.
saying, as a teacher and a technician, I would like to see the needs assessment report so that I know when they say the Vision 2030 is the goal of the curriculum, it's meeting this need that the parents and all the stakeholders said they had. There is a disconnect between the curriculum framework and the slide share needs assessment. We are yet to see the full report.
Right.
But this language of they are specialists, mandates, and that's the alienating language that has been used for the curriculum. We are told we have the mandate. So what does that mean? As a Kenyan, I cannot question. What does that mean for the parents when they're told we have a mandate, or that they are specialists, or that it's this kind of alienating language, which I feel threw the media off, actually, because when that kind of language is used, saying we have the mandate, we are the experts, we know what we are doing, we've researched, then people just switch off and say, okay, you know what you're doing. But that's not right, because education involves all of us. We all have to understand what is being done in the classroom.
Okay, and let me take a break on this particular point. And you've said the three phases, the development, the implementation, and the achievement. Let's see where we are, where we can hope to get to, and if these issues are being interrogated. Aduda has been a bit quiet for the last few minutes here, but you'll give you more chances to respond, especially on the part of the media, because you're a representative of the same, but as well as an educationist. We'll be back shortly. Thank you for the responses and the points that you're throwing in as you follow the discussion. Just to sample some, Charles Mwabili says, glad to see my favorite blogger, so calm, cool, and down to earth. And fabulous Nax Vegas. Don't think that's your real name, but you say the education system should shift asking questions from the teachers to the students for creativity to come. And yes, GK, you say something here that I'll put it straight to the chair of the KICD. Now that you have Sara Ruto in studio, can we have an explanation and a detailed elaboration of the curriculum review process? I'm not too sure how a detailed elaboration, how long that would take, but you can note that down from GK. They just want an explanation on the curriculum review process. And Evelyn Wambui says, I agree with Dr. Wandia on how educative terms mesmerize us, but how can we not be when most of our leaders are illiterate? And Alberto Ochola says, finally, I get a chance to understand this new animal called education reforms. Let me start with Gadara. He says, please explain whether or not we are still in the pilot phase. What does piloting mean if grades 1 and 2 are being implemented in all schools? And which grades will kids starting 844 class 2 and 3 be moving to, if any? Should I read that again, or is that clear?
I think it's clear.
Yeah. So just please explain whether or not we are still in the pilot phase. What does piloting mean if grades 1 and 2 are being implemented in all schools? And which grades will kids starting 844 class 2 and 3 be moving to, if any?
Okay, so last year we did a national pilot, but it was sample-based in 470 schools, 10 per county. From this year, we are still doing a pilot, but it is, if the other one was sample, this is census. Okay. So all the schools, public and private. And the teachers have been trained or inducted.
The 169,000.
168,000 to be precise.
Okay.
And these are all the teachers actually in grades 1 and 2 in all the schools. I attended a number of these, and in the places I went to monitor, it was actually 100%, where the schools for the public, teachers from public schools were there paid for by government, and private schools supported their teachers, and they were all trained by the CSOs. These are the Teacher Service Commission employees who are in charge of a zone. So it was a cascade, and they had initially been trained. So I think that went on pretty well. And if this continues as a way of inducting teachers, then we will have a system where teachers will continually be skilled and retooled, because the new curriculum will need a new teacher who keeps on asking questions. And as somebody has said, if you want to be creative, then you have to keep on asking questions. And this has already started, because one of the things that we're being trained is how to introduce the art of questioning in their classes, which was very different because before it was always a teacher telling children what to do.
So what exactly is this piloting? Does it mean it's still testing to be
Yes.
fully implemented?
Yes, it is still testing. And what that means is that, for example, what we have printed over here, which is the framework, there is an opportunity to actually improve it and change it given the evidence that will come from the pilot.
Right.
So the last pilot was extended to third term, and so what we have is a preliminary report, and perhaps that is why you have not received the fully finalized report, because it is still being finalized. But the information that is coming has now fed into this particular pilot. So what we actually have is what we are calling a reform within a reform. And I think that is the best way, because you're learning how to educate, learning best how to teach. And this means, and research has been introduced in a firm way that will allow us to keep on learning.
So sounds a lot like learning on the job as we, make up our minds as to how this will play out.
And I think that is important, because we have not gone there with any final answers that we know. As much planning has been done, but you're planning based on individuals, and individuals have different characteristics, so have places. Yes. And so it is important to allow what you have planned to be molded by the realities of the teacher meeting with the child, meeting with communities, and having a feedback loop that informs you what is happening.
Right.
And so we are piloting. There will not be any gap. I think the question was,
because he asked then what happens, which grades will kids starting 844 class 2 and 3 be moving to?
So grades 1 and 2 are doing the new curriculum.
Yes.
Next year, we will be launching the full competency-based curriculums in grades 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there will be no gap. The children who will have done grades 1 and 2 of the new curriculum will continue in grade 3, the new curriculum. Remember now, as we are talking, the 470 schools are now piloting the grade 3 curriculum. Okay. And this is what will feed back when we are having the national rollout. But you cannot pilot forever. So the information that has come from the first 3 grades of pilot is what will continue helping us as we are now adding on one grade after the other. After next year, we start with the first 4 years of schooling. So even the children who did the pilot, at no point do they go back to the old curriculum, because these are the children who will be going to grade 4. And that is why it was very important that next year we actually start with grades 1 and 4 in the national full launch, so that no child who has been introduced to the competency-based curriculum goes back. It is now every step forward, right, tightening as we move on.
Okay, tightening as we move on. And yes, it has been politicized, as Duda has said previously by many, even in the teachers' unions, that the teachers are not well prepared. But let's hear from a teacher's perspective in this issue of learning while on the job. Are you content with that?
No, I'm not, because once you do a pilot, you go back, you do the report, look at what were the weaknesses in the first pilot.
Which is what they're doing with the 470.
The pilot ended in December.
Yes.
So they are starting a new pilot before we know what were the results of the first pilot. Were there any things that needed to be modified or rethought before we unroll it to the next pilot? And by the way, that was not what we understood, but maybe I didn't read the reports right. Okay. I understood that the curriculum was to be rolled out in January, and it's only, my suspicion is that it's only after the public said we don't know what's going on that now we are having a second pilot. But I didn't hear of a second pilot being part of the program. What I find interesting is that KICD is not modeling the behavior they want the kids to learn. If you say you want children to ask questions and that is how they are being creative, what do you think my students are seeing now here? Me being told I shouldn't ask questions, that when I'm asking, I'm dismissing. So what kind, if KICD is preaching water and drinking wine, if we want to teach people how to ask questions. We must answer the questions that are already being asked by the public and being asked by the teachers. The second thing I want to say to the media, why are you taking government's word for it? If they say they have trained 168 teachers, usually media goes and asks a few teachers here and there. But when teachers, TSC employed teachers are put on a camera and told, what do you think of the curriculum? I really doubt that they are going to say, oh, I have some reservations, this is not working. In the interest of quote unquote objectivity, the media should ask the teachers. There's too much accepting the government side of things, and the media is not interrogating whether it pans out. And educators should not be afraid of objective confirmation. This is part of what we do. We teach our students to look at different sides of an issue. So to only take one side, and we're talking about education, let's model what we are saying we want students to do.
Right.
Let me just say one thing.
Okay, and then Aduda.
And that is where institutions like the university have a very good place to play as researchers, because research is about systematic investigation to either find out more or affirm what you have been told. And that is a place that I think is very welcome and will be very healthy.
Right. Aduda, in the question of, explaining some of these issues, or even interrogating, not taking the government for the word that it gives, because it's something new. So and it's been painted as something that is, changing the way we will learn. The 2633 system, it will be, a more skill-based kind of system. But this issue of even like a simple question of really finding out from the teachers if they're well prepared, is it that easy? Because some teachers might say they'll be victimized, so they want to be...
Easy it is, and there's evidence. I remember a teacher from Nairobi was on air being questioned and gave very, very honest views about this. That was just sometimes last week. But the most substantive point I want to raise here is, for the media, what would it do in this circumstance? One, the media would do the reporting. Two, would do investigations. Three, do commentaries, which then interrogates and questions. I want to say that we've been approaching this, we've been doing those three things, because there are times when you get information, you tell the public this is what information it is. Then you sit back and ask, what is the information behind this information? And that is why we go and interview the unions. We have even commentaries by the unions being published as they come to raise the discussion, and we encourage people, like Wendy herself, just the other day shared a commentary in our paper. You give everybody also a voice, because sometimes you may not comment on everything, but experts are given platform in your newspapers. Now, that is part of the role of the media. It is not peculiar that it's only journalists who must write those commentaries. We also allow people, and I think we've been doing this. Mm-hmm. If you look at our editorials, you can do a review. You'll find they've been questioning. For example, they've been questioning about how much stakeholders have been engaged. They've been asking, what are the timelines? They've been asking, have the legal and policy frameworks been put in place? These have been in the media. So I think, Dr. Njoya, if you go back and check, you'll find this.
No, what I'm disputing is, for example, when there's an investigation into police or any state politics, you cover people's identity. And yet, this curriculum, the way it has been rolled out, there has been, fire and steam from the CS. Which teacher employed by TSC with a performance contract hanging over their head is going to say, I have reservations about this curriculum? So why don't you also give them that benefit of the doubt? Interview them in an anonymity so that we know whether teachers are not just playing to the gallery or if they're sincere. Mm-hmm. But you can't put a Nairobi teacher with his name and face to the camera and expect him to say, actually, we have not been involved. Even if it is true, he will not say it on camera.
Contrary,
he has his pension and his loans to think about. So interview anonymously, just the way you do for other stories. Interview the teachers. Because you're saying the teachers are saying they've been prepared. my inbox, I'm told other things. But you see, I don't have the access that and the skills that journalists have. I interview them anonymously and see if they'll tell you the same story.
Right. Can I just respond quickly?
Okay.
Two things. One of the teachers, there are many who've been interviewed, but one went on air and said he didn't know this. So the teachers are not afraid.
Didn't know this in terms of they're not prepared or what?
Yes, they're not prepared. Which shows that the teachers are not as staid and laid back as you want to think. They speak out their voices, they speak out their minds. But more importantly, when you hear the union speak, they speak on behalf of the teachers. And I think that's why when we have that clip you'd shown before of Misconception speaking, he's speaking on behalf of his members. And I think that is aired.
Okay, let me just say, I would be skeptical about the unions because they are fighting for the labor rights of teachers. I'm not saying that their voice is not important, but the professional aspect is played down. We are more worried about, are the teachers happy, otherwise they go on strike. So there needs to be a professional voice talking on behalf of the teachers. And these teachers' unions, and in fact we were talking about this in my class today, teachers' unions in other countries also talk about public education and are the kids' interests being defended. And here, unfortunately, and I love the teachers, I'm one of you, but we need more voice about public education and defense of public education, because right now the media has restricted NAT to a labor organization. So usually when we are interviewing the NAT leaders, we just want compliance and confirmation that everything is okay, that there won't be a strike. But that's not enough. We also need to hear professional views of teachers, and that at least has not been coming as much as we would like in the media. And I think teachers should be interviewed without the tag of, oh, are teachers going to accept? Let's hear them as professionals, not as just laborers.
All right, on that point, I'll take another break. Welcome back to Press Pass. Yes, let's get some of the views you're sending in as you follow the conversation. Yeah, Gashanja Mwigai, you say, and let's note this down as I read some of them. Gashanja Mwigai says, even before we go into the specifics of this system, we need to understand exactly the aim to achieve in changing the curriculum. Benji Dolo says, it's a good question, but as a rule, avoid temptation to split hairs and pessimism. Wow. Puritanism leads to that. Well, I think he was responding to someone else's point. Evelyn Wambui asks, what will be the evaluation process? Waigwe Kanyere says, will the teachers require further certification, continuous training to take the children through the new curriculum? And Vicky Omwando, curriculum reforms a candid move in the right direction, but those charged with the responsibility, I believe is what you needed to write, must stop simplistic approach if securing holistic system is anything to go by. The public must be involved because they are key if the new curriculum is to succeed. Yes, the boy child Rosicky, you also ask, will there be exams in this new curriculum? And Mwasaru says, what about areas where this competence system has not been tested? How would the kids transition to the curriculum? Godwin, you say, I think Njoya is asking legit questions, and Madame Ruto seems amused. Key thing is provision of adequate information to the public. It's essential for sustainability, and many more that you are sending in. Thank you for your candid contribution on this. And yes, to the simple and plain questions. First of all, Mr. Aduda, can we admit that as media we gave the misconception that this rollout is starting January and it is throughout all the levels?
No, I think that was a misunderstanding. And part of it was the way information was being shared. I know very well when you're reporting about the piloting last year, you were saying it was in the early grade year, so it was not going to be all through the system. But two, as of last year, the impression the ministry was having was that the actual implementation would begin this year. But I think because also of the public discourse, there was a change that, no, this has to be done more systematically, and that is why the actual rollout has been pushed by 1 year.
Okay.
Yes. Now, what is critical. I mean, the confusion here is semantics, because what the minister talks about in regards to rollout is different with what the public and the media conceive it to be. So this is where the confusion comes in, because the minister explained, for example, that the rollout meant all these systematic stages across the levels. But in public's mind, the change was that now 844 is going to be relegated, of course not entirely, but the actual step of rolling the new curriculum, the actual teaching of the content was going to begin this year, which is what has now not happened.
Okay.
But don't we see the irony that we are educators who are supposed to explain things clearly to the public, and yet the confusion is in education? That's just the irony of the decade. Because we are the people of all professions. We are the people who are supposed to be clearest about what we are doing, and yet we are confused. What does that say about our education system? And on top of that, I add, if some of us cannot ask questions without being personalized and accused, then what are we teaching? Because when I go to class, I'm teaching students how to reason and to think without personalizing issues. And yet when we are discussing education, it's a new ballgame. We are preaching water and drinking wine. The students who are going to be watching us doing this, being messy in the way we are communicating and approaching education issues, they are not going to believe us when we go to the classroom. And for me, that is the saddest part of this process.
Okay. What can besides what we've said about the communication, miscommunication, misunderstanding of what is actually happening, what can the parent expect when they take their child to school? Some took them on Tuesday last week, some are taking them today, have taken them today. What can they expect, especially the nursery and the grade 1, grade 2?
Yeah, and that is what we are calling the early years, which we have begun with. I think there are 5 things. The first is that they should expect less content. In fact, the learning materials that have been developed is very lean on content, and because it is emphasizing more on developing a particular skill or a particular competence. So like at the we have 5 learning areas in the early years. So the skills we are talking about are skills of speaking, skills of listening, skills of reading, of writing, skills of appreciating a friend, those particular simple and age-based skills. So that is the first thing they should expect. The second other major shift is that they should expect more of assessments that will be telling us if the children are learning what they need to learn, rather than more emphasis on the summative examination kind with policemen guarding exams that we have seen. And that will be a very big shift. And I think it is going to lead more to classrooms and a teacher being empowered to assess growth of the child, rather than depending on something else. And then there will be also less of teaching and more of learning, and this comes with also a reorganizing of the way the teaching learning process begins to go. So many things remain the same. If it is about content, if you're teaching about grammar, about the full stop, that remains the same. But it is how you teach it that is going to be the new way. And that is why we decided on this incremental approach, that because it is changing the way you do things, you cannot start, saying that you want to already start this from early years to middle school. Start with early years, institute the processes, train the teachers that you are able to handle at the right time. Keep on every other having shorter way, sessions in which they learn this. And I think that is why I'm convinced we are on the right path. We can improve, but this incremental process is the right way.
So in this rollout that has been postponed to next year, what exactly has been postponed to next year? Because some people are saying, we're coming to school, we're not too sure which books to buy, because we're told that probably we'll need the new books, that a directive was sent by the ministry for different books, and some people are actually on a stalemate. They don't know what books to buy their kids to go to school with. So you're saying, what exactly has been postponed to next year? The parents of those kids who are in nursery and lower primary, will expect to start the new curriculum, right?
Yes.
So what has been postponed to next year, as expressed by Aduda?
What has been postponed to next year is the formal launch of the competency-based curriculum. And what we have this year is another year in which we are open to listening and improving, and also facilitating those sessions for listening. Okay. So like there will be things going on with the Council of Governors, because their mandate is the early years. Perhaps there needs to be more happening with the schools of education, the universities and things. And all this is because this is not cast in stone. This is still a year in which things can be improved. And it is one in which one is inviting everybody to participate, and the processes need to be put, and that we take is something that we need to do, so that we have an all-inclusive particular process. So that is going on. The learning and improving is what is going on, and it will culminate in a national conference, because again, that is important. Last year we had a national conference that set out the pilot. Then we are going to have a national conference in which we tighten up and address all the issues that are coming up before the full launch.
Right. Have we done, as a teacher, from your perspective, a good enough job in, this is a big word, I'm not sure I'm using it in the right place, elucidating the pros and cons of this new system? You've heard us say it's more competency-based, it's more skills-based, and less of those, one-off exams, and more into continuous assessment testing to see if they're learning what they're being taught, and less teaching, more learning. What's your perspective on this in terms of how much can be taken in from the student's perspective?
In fact, one of the major issues I have is with the philosophy. It's not clear why we teach, because the framework says we are teaching for jobs. But if you teach for jobs, students are not going to learn. They're going to say, tell me what I need to know so that I can get a job. They're not going to be creative. They're not going to be free. And even the teacher, and I'm speaking from experience, because as somebody who keeps on being asked, where is the job prospects of the students you are training? We are not going to be that free to be creative in the classroom, because we are thinking the parents and the government want these children to get jobs. So I don't see the connection between what we are saying we want to happen in the classroom and the teaching philosophy outlined in the curriculum framework. Once you tell people education is for jobs, that's the end of learning. And I think that's the national conversation we need to have. Is education only for careers? And the pathways are also tagged on careers. And at the end of the framework, there's even quotas of 20% will do this, 30% will do this, 60% will not do jobs that will require university education. So how do you already predetermine where kids are going to go, and then you ask us to be creative in the classroom? So there are mixed messages in this, and I've been researching on competency-based curriculum. I've seen it some places in Singapore. The UK and the US are trying to introduce it, and the teachers are not happy with it for many pedagogical reasons, which I will not bore
it's a big word.
The
That's
public
a big word.
with.
Break it down for us, okay?
Yeah, I don't want to bore the public with, but as a teacher, the competency-based teaching is not very convincing to me, and the case has not been made for it in the framework. In fact, the framework quotes theories of education that are 30, 40 years old, and quotes the British Council. I don't know what document this is, this awesome document the British Council released. So I'm sorry, I know Kenyans are getting, I don't know what, I wanted to use a bad word. I know Kenyans are getting annoyed that a teacher is asking questions, but imagine if I kept quiet and then we go to the classroom and I'm not sure what we are going to do. We're just going to tell the kids, you learn this is what the government has said. Our questions have to be answered. Right. They have to be, and maybe the parents are too impatient because they want their kids out of the house. But for teachers, and we want to do a good job as teachers, we need these questions to be answered, and the philosophical framework of this curriculum is not clear.
Right.
May I just say one thing?
Yes, and then Aduda.
I think that is where the university, where you sit in, comes in. Because you have the mandate to actually, and the space to do all this kind of research that goes into theories and questions, and then improve the theoretical standing of this document. And so I think I'd like to throw the challenge back to Dr. Wandia, who is sitting in the university, who has many students who can support in this very systematic research process that can actually support and improve this. And there is space to do that. So I think I'd like to invite you. And maybe it would also be good for you to invite us. We can also come to your class and to your students and have these discussions and see how to improve this.
But perhaps,
so this is not about stopping the discussion,
right.
but she's a representative of a university. And universities, I think, can up their game in terms of supporting this process. We could even have a conference, and that was stated by the Cabinet Secretary, that why don't we also have universities organizing a conference where you challenge and this particular process, because it can only help us to be better. And let me just also say one final thing that I believe in, that the curriculum that we have cannot train children, cannot introduce children to jobs that we know, because the jobs of tomorrow, we do not know them. If you look at 20 years ago, the kinds of jobs that children are doing today, we did not know them 20 years ago. And the technological advancements are such that we probably do not know what will happen 20 years to come. So we cannot claim to train children for something because we do not know what that world will be. And I think that is a big challenge when we are talking about this curriculum we are rolling out.
And that's why that table you have at the end of the framework is, what is it doing there? Because it's already saying this is where kids are going. This quarter will go here, this quarter will go here. It shouldn't be in the curriculum, because you're basically saying we are training kids for these jobs. And it's actually repeated throughout the framework. I read the framework. I think Vision 2030 should be removed from the framework. Let's stick to the Constitution, and let's have teachers taught to be creative. That's how I was taught. I was taught there are these different approaches. This is what you use for this material. This is what you use for this material. Mm-hmm. That way, even teachers can continue updating themselves as to what jobs are coming up, and they can also predict, if they want, that this is where the market is going, and I can give my students these skills. But to have a framework that is so rigid until it's even giving you the percentages of who will go where, that is you're tying teachers' hands to the curriculum. And in 2027, when it ends, there are some students who will find that they were trained for jobs that are not there. Let the teachers be free. We actually can add something
right.
to the curriculum.
And that's what she's asking.
There is an open space, please do.
Right.
If you do not have a document in which you can edit, we will share. Please do. Because that is why the pilot is still continuing. It is not cast in stone. And we want to see more presence of the university.
This is a very emotive issue because it involves our children. Someone would say, as she's challenging the education sector, she's challenging the media to set the agenda on this particular issue. These are discussions that we're meant to be leading out there in terms of the pros and cons of this system. You might say we've written articles, but are we doing it enough? Like, what should be our role right now as this second phase pilot is on?
To be realistic, we've not done as much as we could. We've done something, but we've not done as much as we could.
Right.
In my view, going forward, we'll have to go more into in-depth, and as I had indicated before, give opportunities to various voices to articulate the issues that may be hidden. So the media still has a role, which is to provide the platform, invite more discussions, and even press pass, for example, should have more sessions discussing this, because I know today we've not covered many areas. For example, we've not even looked at what are the various levels, what's included in all this, are they valid, is that what the parents looking for. So I think the media has to open more space for the discussion, which is very valid. The only exception I take to Dr. Njoya is when she dismisses the media as having not done anything and as having been muted and stifled. That's not the case.
Right. Oh dear, she's a bit in shock. I'll let it simmer.
Yes.
Kathy G asks, how will this be competence-based when in public schools a teacher has over 70 kids? Competence-based is very personalized. Or is the government going to employ more teachers so class has at least 3 of them?
One of the things I once read about, and this were in schools in Uganda, which and they had tried competency-based a while ago, is a large class methodology. So there is a way in which you can still retain what you want to do, even if you have small class or bigger classes. But it is very difficult. It helps when you have materials. It helps when, for example, you use grouping, and where the children who are a little bit better are like the peers leading a particular group, and by them teaching their or guiding their fellows, they also learn and reinforce their own learning. So there are a number of methodologies that one can use, but it is based on materials being there, and these materials will be in schools hopefully by the end of the month. I'd like to advise any parent, please do not, at least for the early years, grades 1 and 2, buy any materials as yet, because there are materials that are for this competency-based curriculum that have been prepared, and publishers have done a very good job at it, that will be there. So it is possible, but difficult, and it is better if we had manageable classes, and that is what one should aim for.
All right, and I'll get to, I actually want, let me ask you this particular issue on the textbooks, because there are those who, even one of my colleagues, they'd already been given out letters by the schools, buy these books. So now, what guides the parent? What is the what is the verified kind of book that someone would need to buy? What is that mark that someone will know this is a book I will need? Is it KICD approved? What is that?
A good learning material is a good learning material. So let me start from there and not dismiss any. But because parents need guidance, I would recommend that at least now they first buy the KICD approved ones, because they are based on the designs and the content that needs to be taught. And thereafter, additional learning materials, if you so wish, can be purchased. And these have been really meticulously developed. And so I would ask them to wait and buy these, and then they beef up with similar kinds of materials so that you do not confuse a child.
Then what are they using right now, if indeed they have to wait, first of all?
So one of the things we had said is, because we had this delay in ensuring that the books are there, is to ensure that each teacher at least has the designs. And these designs should have gone by, designs are what we used to call before the syllabus.
Right.
It's a very detailed, that starts from the general and ends up to the very specific, linking with other learning areas. And teachers have been prepared on in terms of how they can interact with this. I think the confidence levels of some teachers is not as high as for others, but this would be what they can start with, as hopefully by the end of the month they will get the materials in their schools.
Let me put the last one to you before I go to Dr. Wandia. Zinduko says, please don't let that issue pass. And this is, did Dr. Ruto just say that it is the university that comes in with a philosophical foundation for the policy? How on earth is KICD rolling out a curriculum without a philosophical basis? This is a disaster. Could you clarify on that issue, as you were challenging Dr. Wandia?
I challenged Dr. Wandia that in the university, they are in a very comfortable position to be able to go into theoretical research. And it is this theoretical research that informs the philosophical underpinnings of anywhere. We have not gone on without any philosophical underpinnings at all. There has been a question that they are too old, whatever the case may be. And so the challenge is that how do we improve it? And I think the university stands at a good place to take leadership in this. And it is not wrong to expect the university to do this. The Curriculum Institute is very good at one aspect, the university is very good at another aspect. And this is what is the consultative and inclusive approach that I think would benefit this country if we saw more of it.
Gashanja Mwigai says neither Dr. Wandia or Sara Ruto is answering the key question of why we are changing the curriculum in the first place, or are we simply bringing A-levels via the back door?
Yes, I think, he wanted me to answer that question.
Yeah, she's saying that's
yes, I think it's A-levels through the back door. Because we are asking students to choose their careers in mid-high school, which was what I went through. And I said, still on NTV, that there was a problem with that, because by the time we left school, we discovered that some of the subjects which we should have paid more attention to, we did not. And so we had problems in the workplace. So to me, this is it's funny, it's a mix between 844 and the old system. The older system in the sense of telling children to choose careers while they are still in high school, but 844 in the sense that we are still adding the artistic and practical subjects.
Yes.
And so it's a mix between the two, and that's why we needed a clarification on what is the philosophy behind the curriculum. Are we training for jobs or are we training for society? And from the slide share, which is not an official document of KICD, the parents wanted children who were all-rounded and children who could be citizens who did not hate one another along tribe. And yet, the curriculum we have been given is about jobs. To me, that's a huge disconnect. And so I feel that it's not too late, but KICD should have come before if they wanted an interrogation of the philosophy behind education, because actually that has been the weakest point of education since colonial times. We have never clarified as Kenyans why we are going to school. It has been jobs, 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 and you can see it's not taking us anywhere. It's making us competitive, money-minded, and we don't love one another. And so there needs to be a shift to society, and unfortunately, which is what I would have expected and which parents asked for, it's not in the curriculum framework.
Right. And in our closing comments, because we can go on, but we're out of time, and I promised my director I'll try to keep time this year.
Two things I will comment about.
Yes, have we explained the 2633 system well? And now that it's already being implemented in terms of the second pilot phase, what's our place right now as media?
Our place is to continue the explanation, because one of the things Dr. Njoya talked about, the philosophy. From a media point of view, it may be difficult to start a discussion around that. But then we need to tell the public where are we headed to with the new system, and why the new system, and why not the previous one, and why not the ones we had in 85, and why not the one we had in 1964. So we need to have that conversation. The second thing is that the media is open to all voices. And in this discussion, it is not purely the journalist who will talk, but everybody with a view needs to express it, because education, and I remember the minister saying the other day that even charcoal burners have a view, they have to be listened to. So everybody who has a view, we as the media ought to provide a platform for them to articulate that. And I think that one we want to commit ourselves to doing, because that's the duty we'll be doing, to the extent that in the later generations, they'll say the media played this role in helping in the conversation, the critiques, the positives, and all that to make this system a better system. But I think we are on the right course.
On the right course.
Yeah.
Wandia, your last comment, and then Dr. Ruto. He says we're on the right course moving forward in terms of this curriculum. What's your opinion on this? Seems that we will go on with it, but what is your desire?
My desire is for Kenyans to have a conversation about why are we educating. That is so fundamental, and it's a question we have avoided since colonial times. We have to ask, why are we educating? If we educate our kids for a system, then the system lets them down, the kids are going to blame us. So we need to ask that question, and that needs to be affirmed going forward. The second thing I would like to see, although my wishes will definitely not be considered, is for us to put off the classroom implementation and first deal with the infrastructural issues. Do we have enough classrooms? Do we have enough labs? Do we have enough teachers to make this curriculum work? Spend the next 5 years sorting that out. One of the things we really need is guidelines on the assessment, because we have been bad-mouthing teachers for the last 20 years about how they are cheats and how they cheat in exams. But now we are expecting them to do their assessments, and it will count for 70% of the grade. We need to roll out the guidelines to that, because if the teachers are as bad as the ministry says they are, then there's going to be a problem with integrity of results. So, and then the third thing I want to say is that I'm worried about competency-based education. It is increasing the amount of testing for students. We may not have a summative exam, but kids will be doing more and more tests in the classroom. I don't know whether that's what the parents wanted. And finally, we need the needs assessment report, a comprehensive needs assessment report that reports what the needs are and what we are trying to address.
Right. When can that needs assessment report be ready for the public consumption? And with the feedback that you are getting as KICD and the ministry is getting, can there be changes to what you're implementing so far, or is it cast in stone?
It is not cast in stone. And that is why we have stated repeatedly that this is a national pilot that is going on, in which we have, as a question was asked, instituted, using our monitoring and evaluation framework, a system in which we get feedback that loops back to improve the practices and the policies as we are moving forth. So it is not cast in stone. The discussion is still open, and every Kenyan of goodwill should open up mechanisms. At the Institute, we will open them up, but so should others open them up for this discussion to go on. Mm-hmm. I think the final thing I'd like to state is that in curriculum reform, ideally ought to be done every 5 years. And this is because you have changes that come in. And you do not want to have a school and a classroom that is completely divorced from reality. And the only way to check that is to go back to those designs you had developed and to see that there is Concord. Today, the classroom, the world outside is very digital. But when you go to a majority of the schools, especially those off the tarmac, it is still pepper and, or chalk teacher teaching, not so much doing, and yet we know that children learn better when you use all the senses. Right. So it is important to go back to the drawing board, and that is why one cannot wait another 5 years, because then another 5 years, then it would be time for then another review, because the world changes that way. I think the most important thing is to plan. If you look at a difference between the 844 and now, is that this time there has been a better planning. And the better planning is helping us at least be more assured of the outcomes that we want. Can we improve? Certainly we can improve. But I think it is important to take the next step forward as we address the various issues, and starting with the early years. And by the time we get to the middle years, where there'll be more complexity in terms of the curriculum, more complexity in terms of the teacher demands, at least there will be a different and a shift in the posture of the teacher, which is very critical. All
right. When can that evaluation report be ready? She wants her hands on it.
The pilot report?
Yes.
I have seen a draft, and it is based on the draft that we have actually used the findings. There were a number of findings that teachers, I think 30% of the teachers were not comfortable with the competency-based curriculum. In terms of digital training, a vast majority of teachers had not been trained, and yet digital learning is at the center of it. So, excuse me. So it is these findings.
Sorry.
Let me take some water, please.
All right. As she makes
so it is these findings that actually informed fact that we needed to extend the pilot.
Okay.
It was not just made idly.
All
it
right.
was on the basis of the evidence that we had.
So when can it be ready? She's still...
All I can state is that when it is ready, then it shall be given. Even if it is in draft form, we should be very happy.
Or is it
no,
just
first of all, to Dr. Wandia, because she is asking of it, knowing that this is still a draft document, because a finalized document, you are in publishing. Before you publish anything, even to the website, you have to ensure that it is a good document.
Right.
Yes, but there is a draft that is available.
Okay.
I'm asking on behalf of the public, so I will share what I get.
Oh, then
so it needs to be a final report.
Then it will be, which will have to take its own wheels in order to be ready. But this draft, I think what is important is that it is the draft that has informed the various steps we are taking as we are moving to the national pilot.
All right, I brought it up, but I need to just give you a chance to clarify. Please, can you clarify, this is from Zinduko, that the statement on this program, the KICD does not have a philosophical basis for the curriculum and is looking for partners to give a theoretical basis, provide cover for what it is already rolling out. How is this possible? Let's clarify.
We do have a philosophical framework, and it is contained in the basic education curriculum framework. It is available for download.
Okay.
It is there.
From your website?
From the website.
All right.
What I stated is that it is open for discussion. That is why we are in a pilot.
And improvement.
And improvement.
Wow.
But we have the document. If I could give the gentleman the hard copy that I have, I would gladly give the gentleman.
Maybe one day I would work with
yeah, and the KICD website was down the last time I checked, a few hours ago.
So you probably get that hard copy.
Yes.
There you go.
I've saved.
She will get the
and you
hard
can
copy.
expect it as well. She'll definitely be breaking down this framework that has been given to her. And this is a conversation that will continue. I can't end in one sitting, in one panel, but I appreciate the panel for your views. And this is a conversation I hope you'll be ready to continue, giving your input on. And as we continue with the implementation, Dr. Sara Ruto, Dr. Wandia Njoya, and David Aduda.